I'm going to talk to you today about why I was an angry mom and what I know now that would have made me different. This is going to be a very honest, vulnerable sharing. It came to me when my therapist asked me, as I was explaining to her some memories and things that I had had of how I had reacted angrily with my kids. And she said, "Why do you think you were an angry mom?" And I don't like to answer that right away. I could. I mean, I'm not like dumbfounded by that. I have a pretty good idea, but I like to think about it for a while and kind of see if I can get some really additional insight, which I did. And it went, kind of churned in me. And I thought, you know what, I should do a podcast on that or a video on that. So I was raised, as you know, most of you, in a dysfunctional home. I was the oldest child of four. My dad was an alcoholic. He was angry. He was physically, emotionally, and verbally abusive with my mother and verbally abusive with us kids. There was a lot of anger in my home. From the time I was two, I told my mom, "Daddy shouldn't talk to you that way." And so I was obviously aware of it. When I was 3.5, I stood beside my mom for the first time to protect her and tell my dad to not hit her and to leave her alone. And I refused to leave the room, even when a 6 foot angry, drunk man was yelling at me and telling me to leave. So that was pretty dysfunctional. And I spent my time in that home. My dad did not get sober till I was 17. And I was the protector of my mom and the kids and the voice of the one that was telling everyone what was wrong and what needed to change. Told my mom she needed to leave, told my dad to leave her alone. And I that's that's how I grew up. My anger felt powerful. It felt like I was able to do something. It felt like I was like making change. In reality, other than the momentary protection I gave my mom, there was no change. He got sober when I was 17, not because of me, but because he had some health problems that his doctor confronted him with and said, "You have to quit drinking." And he did. And yet I learned that anger was a way of responding to things that felt out of control. So when I got married when I was 20, and all I had ever wanted growing up in that home was to not have a home like that when I got married. I wanted to have a Christian home, a happy home. I did not want fighting. I wanted to be present for my kids. I wanted it to be wonderful. And it was not. I met my husband in church, and he had come from a dysfunctional home, big surprise. And neither of us knew anything about that dysfunction in terms of having words, understanding. He was actually in denial that his home was dysfunctional, but we didn't have words. We didn't have a background. There was not a lot of material out in the world. It was just starting to come out about dysfunctional families. Definitely didn't have it talked about in the church. I had gone to Al-Anon once with my dad, and I came out of there and said, "I don't need to go back because those kids' parents are still drinking and you're not, and I've forgiven you and I'm fine." No awareness of how alcoholism had affected me as an adult child of an alcoholic, which it had. So I was used to using anger when I felt afraid, out of control. And in my marriage with the dysfunction, I felt afraid and I felt out of control. So what did I do? I was angry. And there were times that I felt out of control with raising my kids, which I'll go into a lot of those reasons throughout this talk. And so, how did I respond? I responded with anger. I used anger to try to control my kids and get my kids to do what was right. There was, in fact, this was the thing that prompted, that I told my therapist that prompted me to think through it. This is one time, I think one of my daughters was about 8. And this just absolutely breaks my heart to even think about. I dropped her off at my mother-in-law's house for my mother-in-law to take her to school because I had to go to work before she had to go to school. I worked part-time. And I was mad, as I usually was on the way to drop them off, because I used anger and being mad to get them out the door. And she looked at me with her sweet little girl eyes and she said, "Mommy, I don't like it when you leave when you're angry." Now, today, if a kid said that to me, oh my word, I would react with, "Oh, I am so sorry. I am not angry with you. I am angry at my own stuff and I should not have handled that way and I should not be angry with you and I'm sorry, you sweetie. I love you. And mommy's sorry that I was angry this morning and I want you to have a good day and I will be thinking good thoughts about you." And I would have hugged her, maybe prayed with her and blessed her as she got out of my car. What did I do? I said, "Get out of the car." Are you kidding? I am not. I said, "Get out of the car." That is horrendously horrible. That lets you know how strong that hold of anger was in me because I felt that I had to control things with my anger. Honestly, horrible. I did not let myself feel sadness, fear, hurt. I went straight to anger because that's where I put all my feelings into. They went straight to anger. Anger is really a secondary emotion. Something else happens that you then react to with anger. The second thing is that I had a very dysfunctional marriage, and my husband was emotionally and verbally abusive, very passive aggressive. I felt very crazy with that, very hurt. And how did I respond to try to get him to change? I explained and I tried to get him to talk, and he wouldn't talk. He would shut down, which would make it even worse. He would not resolve things. I could not tell him my feelings. I was absolutely distraught, wound up, uptight, walking in fight and flight all the time from that. And I kept trying and trying and trying to get him to change, trying to explain, trying to figure out what to do with it. And all that anger that I had towards him, and it was a lot that I could not resolve with him because nothing got fixed, was displaced onto my kids. I was agitated and I was living in fight flight. And so my kids got some of that. Now, did I never do anything good with my kids? I did a lot of good stuff. I was a stay-at-home mom for a couple of years when they were born. I worked only part-time in my profession, so I could be home most of the time. I baked from scratch. I cooked from scratch. I put them in private school. I volunteered at the private school. I taught them to read before they went to kindergarten. I made crafts. I sewed curtains for them. I taught them things they needed to know beforehand. I was always, I did play dates with them. I made sure that their health was taken care of. I fed them healthy. Taught them the Bible. I read them bedtime stories. I did lots of good things for my kids. That's what I did when they were little. My daughters that had health problems, I was a model mom in how I took care of them. I was always praised by the doctors for with my daughter's eye problems. And they said, you could train our other moms on how to take care of babies that have infantile cataracts, that need surgery, that need contacts put in. And so I was very good in so many ways. I was on top of their schools. I brought them to their sports. I made sure that they had things that they excelled in, whatever their talents were. I could go on and on, so many good things. But I was an angry mom and I did not handle things well. And it was damaging on top of the dysfunction that I allowed them to continue to live in and be raised in. These are my biggest regrets. So, yes, I dumped it onto them. Now, we also disciplined them with models that I now realize were not the best for our home and with our kids. I call them angry discipline models. They weren't supposed to be angry discipline models, but when they didn't work, it ended up being anger. And they were the dare to discipline Dr. Dobson's, the break your child's will, not the spirit, but the will, which meant that you were supposed to get your child to basically obey you without thinking and to repent when they do wrong and to do what you say. Didn't work, especially with my strong-willed child. It caused more anger. It caused more frustration with her. And I never felt good about spanking any kid, even when they were little. And so it always made me feel like uncomfortable and guilty, which when you feel guilt, then you have to do something with it. If you can't work it through, then it goes underground, and that can be more anger. And also, my husband believed, in a spare the rod, spoil the child kind of thing, but not that he spanked that much, but he was very reactive and kind of moody and inconsistent, but really angry when he dealt with the kids and when he would throw out, especially as I got older, punishments that were extreme. And, like you don't talk to me right at the table or you don't answer me and then you can't go to prom. That's crazy. And I always tried to make him see what he was doing wrong. So I argued with him and I tried to get him to change, but I also would carry out his, in anger, he would give them a discipline and I would carry it out. Like I would take the car away or I would not let them go out. And I would disagree with it and be super upset. But I felt like I had to submit and I had to do what he said. And once he said it, that was the way it was. And in hindsight, I would not do that. I would not enforce a discipline that I disagreed with, that I felt was an anger and unfair and not good for a child. Some of those I would set boundaries and not allow to happen. Some of those I would refuse to carry out. I would obviously could require therapy and a change in the dysfunction in our relationship and in the way we parented. Had I had the awareness that this wasn't healthy and good and we needed to do something else, then all of those things. But I would parent very differently. I would not, I would use probably logical consequences, which I think would have been a model where you're much less angry with your kids. You're not, in fact, it doesn't work if you're angry with your kids. Logical, natural consequences. You can't be an angry parent and do that, or it's back to the other way, just yelling at them. Because I would yell and I would nag and all of those things. And the other type of model that they talk a lot about today is to be connected to your child, to establish connection when they do something that is wrong. or when you need them to do something and to validate their feelings and their thoughts, and then teach them what it is or give them logical consequences or whatever lesson they need to learn to talk that through with them. I think that works really well too. But I would do that along with those logical consequences. So again, kind of seeing a theme here, there's a lot of reactivity, a lot of fear that ends up being anger. Also, I had a lot of anger with triangulating. Now, what that means is that you have a relationship with two people, between two people, and a third one jumps in and creates a triangle. And when you do that, you make one person the persecutor, the person that is doing the wrong to the child would be my husband. And then I was the rescuer, jumping in to rescue the child that he was mistreating. And what would happen is he would get mad that I was jumping in and interfering, which means he would be madder with the child and mad at me. And then I would try to argue with him. For a moment, the child felt rescued, but child knew by then that it's going to end up getting extra blowback onto them because I was jumping in. So get to the point where it'd be like, go away, mom. But then when he didn't listen to me and he didn't, or stop doing what he was doing and back down, then I would feel even more anxious at this point. And then that would cause me to try to talk to the kid about changing something to keep this from escalating and to dissipate it. So then I would turn on the kid and say, well, now, you could have talked to your dad differently. You could have just done what he said. You could have at least told him this, or you could have just listened. You could have just done it. And then this wouldn't be happening. And then the child felt abandoned. And then what happened is at the end of this, husband was mad at me, the child was mad at me. I was mad at the child because the child also did not do what I said and back down. And then my husband was mad at me and I was mad at him because he didn't listen. So all of us were angry with each other after I triangulated. So instead, what I would do is I would do a lot less triangulating. And there would be times that instead of triangulating, I would, one, have talked to him like before, or I mean, after in private. I might have talked to my kid in private. And the other thing I would have done is if the kid really was in danger, rather than jumping in and trying to convince my husband he was doing something wrong with the child standing there, I would remove the child and just say, this isn't happening, like not doing this. And I would just deal with him or I would get the child out of there. So there wouldn't be a whole lot of need to have a conversation. It would be more of a rescue procedure where I would pull the kid out and then I would decide what to do. That's a boundary. I would just pull the kid out and be like, not happening. And then I would decide, what boundaries do I need to set? Do I need to do an ultimatum? Does it need to be therapy? Do we need to separate? What's going on? Is this bad enough? Or was this just something that I just need to say wasn't good? And, again, very hard to do at the time because I was into had to submit to my husband. He was really angry when I would do stuff like this because he'd be like, you don't interfere with me. You don't tell me what to do. I'm the head of the house. So this was all very difficult. Okay. Anger also came from a fear-based faith. Now, I told you that fear is lower brain. I don't know if I told you that. I recorded this whole thing about a half hour prior to this and forgot to turn the recording on. So this is take 2. So fear comes from your lower brain, your autonomic nervous system. It's the fight or flight system. So it's like you sense something dangerous, your lower brain automatically makes you pay attention, perk up, pay attention. This is danger. You either have to fight or you need to flee. Now we talk about, or freeze because you're so scared you can't move, or fawn, you appease somebody to kind of get rid of the threat. But fight or flight, I was already in fight or flight, which we'll talk about. And then now I had a fear-based faith. I was young, first child at 23, second at 26, third one was at 32. I had a fear-based faith that said, do everything you can to make sure your children are raised right, make sure that they get saved, that they stay saved. I grew up in a home where my parents did not help me. They did not teach me how to deal with peer pressure, didn't show me how to put on makeup. My mom didn't talk to me much about sex, about dating, all of those things. I was alone and figured them out on my own. I did not want that for my kids. I wanted to protect my kids. That comes from fear. I wanted to make sure my kids were okay. So I was going ahead of them rather than behind them and always trying to explain things. Well, I was also in a very traditional church. So this was in the 80s with a lot of the new age. So no rainbow bright, no unicorns, no rainbows, nothing that could be black magic or white magic or all of these things. I wanted didn't want my kids to date young. I wanted to make sure that they didn't do things with boys. I wanted to make sure that they didn't smoke pot, that they didn't smoke cigarettes, they didn't drink alcohol, they didn't take drugs, that they just, and all of that was, I was just fearful. So I was overreacting to that. And I was angry when there was anything that was happening as they became teenagers that showed that that could be happening. And I handled it with anger based on my fear. And the anger, again, was what I had used as a child to react to fear as a way of controlling to deal with that. So that, in hindsight, what I would do today is, one, I'm much less fear-based. I'm not afraid of rainbows and unicorns in their, you know, cartoons and things like that. And I'm able to turn my children over to God and things that I can't control over to God and to trust Him. I have more of a faith-based belief system than a fear-based belief system now. Much more trust in God. The other thing is that I was angry from being in that fight or flight all the time. And that's called emotional or nervous system dysregulation. Our nervous system is supposed to be regulated, meaning that we are not in fight or flight unless there is something threatening that happens when our lower brain puts us into fight or flight to gear us up to protect ourselves. And then after that incident, we're supposed to come back down and have a regulated nervous system that is calm and that is not hypervigilant looking for what's wrong. I had a hypervigilant, dysregulated nervous system. So do my children after having been raised in a dysfunctional home. My husband does from being raised in a dysfunctional home. I did not know that my nervous system was dysregulated. I did not know until about 8-9 years ago what the fallout of that really was. And that's when we started hearing a lot about that. Actually, I was going to say that's not true. So it was probably, I went to my first seminar on that, maybe when my youngest was about 18. So it was a while before that, but didn't really I internalized it for what was going on with her, but not as much for myself until maybe about 8 or 9 years ago. But I was in fight or flight all the time. And because I was in fight or flight all the time, I was overreacting to things that were happening, and the things that were happening were making my nervous system dysregulated. Now, from the time I was a child, I never felt safe. In my marriage, I didn't feel safe. The times in my marriage back then, in the last, especially the first 20 years, was very unsafe. Then it was more episodic after that, depending on what was going on. Now I feel relatively safe, but I'm jarred fairly quickly from something that feels like old stuff, but I'm very aware of even slight nervous system dysregulation now after somatic therapy. And I am willing to work on it and do what I need to do to try to keep my nervous system much more regulated. And because of that, I've been able to become much less reactive, much more active. Reactive means something happens and you react to it. You don't think about it. You don't choose how to respond. You just respond. And it is almost instinctual or impulsive, or it's like without thought. And it's usually dysfunctional when that's that way. And it's usually based when you react and it's in dysregulation, it's going to be dysfunctional. It's going to be unhealthy usually. So I am able to choose better how to act, which means that I've made a lot of changes in how I interact with my mom, who can trigger me in the fact that she's very enabling of certain people in the family, and that affects me. And but I'm able to be much calmer with her. Or if I'm bothered by something she does, I'm able to be much calm with her. My husband can be calmer with him, and I'm definitely much less reactive and calmer with my children and grandchildren. And I love feeling this way compared to how I used to feel. Now, I told the therapist, when she first observed me getting extremely angry at my youngest daughter for not being willing to go into the therapy session that I brought her to and was paying for cash. And I just lost it and was doing everything I can. And I was up here with my reactivity. And she said, "You're going to pay for this. Why don't you just come in? This is a somatic therapist." And I was like, not really feeling it right now. She just goes, "Come on, come on, come in." So I just sat down and I was fuming. And she goes, "Just want to show you how to let go of some of that anger." And she gave me this simple exercise and it worked. And then she was like, "Do you want to work on this? Do you want to, do that?" And I was like, "No, not really. My energy, I love having adrenaline. It works for me. I like to get a lot done. I'm super productive. I get really high on being productive. I just it jazzes me up just to be like, oh, the more I get done, the better. And I don't want to calm myself down. I don't want to get rid of my stress. It works for me." And my dad's 90 at the time. I said, "My dad's 90 and he's way more stressed than me. And he's still alive and he's really healthy and I'm gonna be fine." And she's like, "Maybe not. You might not be your dad. It does have an effect on you." And I was like, "Well, I don't know. I don't know." So I really seriously, that was a very serious conversation for me, and I was not interested. Roll time forward after a while. I tried it. She talked me into trying it. And after about 6 months, I literally had an experience where my husband called me, not mad at me, but just venting about something that made him angry at Home Depot. And in slow motion, I felt my body respond to his tension. And I went through this slow, like shock type response where I could feel my hips tighten, my throat tighten, my breathing go shallow, like it was crazy. And I felt like it was in slow motion. And I was like, oh my gosh, that is how stress affects me. That's how him being angry, not at me, but about something affects me. And then I was a believer after that. So I worked hard on somatic, got a long way to go. I probably never will stop doing it, but I would regulate my nervous system and I would do things to make sure I was much more regulated. Now, I also had something that I didn't know about until about 15 years ago, and that was I suffered from small nerve neuropathy, which meant my entire body, the small nerves are firing, and I feel like I'm withdrawing from drugs or cigarettes all the time, and my nerves hurt. And I did not know that. Found it out by accident when my sister offered me some gabapentin. And from when I was complaining about my nerves hurting, and then I just felt calm and that lack of restlessness and that nerve pain for the first time in my life. And I was just like, oh my gosh. Then I went to a doctor and got diagnosed, and I take gabapentin. That made me impatient. Now, I felt bad about myself because I always felt like I was on edge. And I know my mom thought it was because of my difficult marriage. I felt it like it was me, that I was just impatient. And I know now that it was that diagnosis. So I would have treated that earlier had I known it. Now, the last one is that I was angry from being enmeshed. I was incredibly codependent, as I would be growing up in a dysfunctional home and being the rescuer of my mom and the protector of my mom and the one who tried to change everyone. So when I married my husband, I had done no work. I was very codependent. And in fact, I told my college friends when I got married that I didn't really need to have friends in my life anymore, which, oh my gosh, that's classic codependent. I only needed my husband, was so happy to be married, and he was going to be everything to me. And guess what? He wasn't planning on being everything to me. He had other things in his life, and I did not do well. I felt very abandoned when those things came up. That I worked on that 6 years into the marriage, but I still was very enmeshed. He was enmeshed. We expected us to feel the same about things and understand and agree on things. And we wanted our kids to go along with our ideas and things that we cared about. And it was not healthy. And that made me even more affected by his lack of concern for my feelings and caring about the things that mattered to me. And when he was abandoning with his dad, with me, then I was even more angry. In fact, I was furious and did not deal well with that, which added a whole nother layer of anger toward him that got displaced onto my kids, and also towards my kids when they weren't doing the things that we both thought that they should do. So that's a lot, right? So I said I was an angry mom because I grew up angry as a child in a dysfunctional home, and anger is what made me feel in control over the fear that I had. Okay, I can't change that, but I could certainly understand it and work on it, which I would do. I have done, but I would have done back then if I had known. I was angry with my husband, displaced it on my kids, not okay. Should have dealt with the issues with my husband and not displaced them onto my kids. Also, I would have detached and not cared about what was going on with him and just kept my kids safe and comfortable and had dinners on the bedroom floor and gone out to McDonald's instead of sat at really, really tense dinner tables. I would just not do that again. So I would work on the problems with him and not displace them on my kids. Angry discipline model, I would use a different model. I would use logical consequences or the connect and the empathize and teach models. I would not triangulate, but I would set firm boundaries. I would have a faith-based belief system instead of fear-based. I would work on my codependency and get rid of the enmeshment so that I wouldn't be angry from that. I was also not really relational for at least, I don't know, for the first 20 years of our marriage. Like I just was so focused on my husband that I just I didn't have, I just wasn't fully present, I think. I would work on get my nervous system regulated so that I wasn't not regulated, and of course, treat my small nerve neuropathy. Now, all of those things said, this is a very hard podcast to do. I think I'm telling you the low, like honest to God truth about the bad things about myself in a way that I probably haven't been as this detailed about before. This is hard. I have so many regrets about this. It's been the biggest pain-filled area of my life and hardest to forgive my husband over, and easy to forgive what he did to me compared to how this has affected our kids and what he did to the kids. I have worked through this and forgive myself. I did the best I could. I was a person struggling with a lot. I was struggling with my faith and trying to stay faithful to what I believed and what I thought God wanted me to do. I was a caring mom. I was trying really hard. Had a lot from my childhood and from the marriage. Um, I will always have regrets, but I will not judge and condemn myself, not condemn myself, judging and then condemning. I will understand and have compassion. Isaiah 118, one of my favorite verses, especially being a therapist, says, "Come now, let us reason together, says the Lord. Though your sins are like scarlet, they shall be as white as snow. Though they are red as crimson, they shall be as white as wool." God is saying, come on, sit down. Let's reason this out. Reason means to think it through, figure it out. That's what I'm doing. That's what I did. I thought it through. I've worked through it. And this has been a 30 years, 20 years of working through, but even working through at a deeper level lately. I have forgiven myself by understanding the what and the why. God's saying, I'll do it with you. Let's sit down. Let's figure it out. That's what a therapist does with you when you go into the office. If you need to, go to a therapist and sit down and work this through. I understood the reason. I don't excuse it. It's not excusing it, it's understanding it, which is where compassion and forgiveness comes from. I will forever regret it and wish I could do it differently, but I cannot. Therefore, I have to do what's called living amends. I have to be willing to admit what I did wrong with my kids. I have to be able to be accountable, listen to them, which I'm much better at doing now that I have forgiven myself and I'm not as defensive and reactive when they bring something up. Because when you haven't forgiven yourself and you're guarded or defensive with it because you're trying to protect yourself from having to admit it, because it hurts to admit you've done these things, then you're going to be reactive when they bring it up. And then you're going to do more damage because you're going to be defensive and deny it and get angry again. That does not work. So when I've forgiven myself, I can hear them, I can empathize, I can listen, I can say, I'm sorry, I can say, I know that was really bad. I don't have to excuse it. I can care and show my kid that I care. I also show that I care to everyone in my life by treating them differently. I am not an angry person today. Can I get angry? Yes. Can I react occasionally? Absolutely. But I am not an angry person all the time. I am not guaranteed to react like that. They don't expect that from me. And they've all admitted that there's been a lot of change, and that's wonderful. So my hope is in being vulnerable, that you would be able to look at yourself and in any area of your life, but you probably listen to this if you were struggling with guilt over your parenting, whether you were an angry mom, an absent mom or dad, or disconnected, or abandoning, or abusive, or any of those things, maybe whatever it is, I invite you to do the same. Why were you that way? Figure it out, reason it out with a therapist, with the Lord, with yourself. Figure it out, be accountable, change today with whatever that takes, whatever help you need. Be able to acknowledge it and apologize and carry that compassion and that self-forgiveness to someone else who you can help forgive themselves. You want to treat yourself like you would treat a friend. You're listening to me. I hope that you're not judging me, but that you're having compassion and you're sensing that has been hard in many ways, for obviously harder for my kids than for me, but hard for me too. And it's hard to have that regret and admit all this. So, and it's hard to change. So to be able to change behavior at a very deep level and sustain that change is also difficult. It's a lot of work. It's been a long time. It's going to continue to be work, as we all should be, as God told us, like God's going to continue to perfect our faith until the last breath that we take. So my prayer is that you would use this as a catalyst to look at yourself and to get insight, to make changes, and to forgive yourself. I'd like to suggest that you go to my website, look at my classes. They're very, very affordable, cheap, almost nothing. And they will help you with skills to get yourself more regulated, to understand your childhood, to understand your current relationship, understand yourself, to heal from the wounds of your past, to set boundaries, to deal with dysfunctional people, all in a scripture-based setting and with scripture to support it, which is super helpful if you're a Christian struggling with how to apply the Bible to your dysfunction in your life and your problems. So God bless you. My prayer is that there would be change in your life as a result of my vulnerability. God bless you, and thank you for watching and listening.